Me again. As promised, I am going to go through the US visa application process. Okay, let's start. Now, the visa that I was applying for was called an L1A, and an L1A visa is a temporary work visa that allows your company to transfer employees from one office location to the US, initially for 3 years, but then you can extend it in increments of 2 years up to 7 years. The L1A visa is specifically for employees that are of a managerial or executive level in their company. So therefore, you do need to prove this to qualify, and I will clarify that later. To be eligible, you also need to prove that you've been working for the company for at least 1 year in the last 3 years. And to be clear, it is a sponsored visa, so you do need your company to sponsor you and initiate this process. Lastly, the L1 visa allows your spouse and children to come along with you too, which is a good plus. And they will come on what is called an L2 dependent visa. Now, before anything else could happen with my visa application process, the company had to satisfy that I qualified for this L1A visa. Unfortunately for me, I was the ideal case, and hopefully when I clarify some of the questions the attorneys asked me, that will be clear to you. The visa process started with an introduction to the law firm that would be guiding me through this process. And initially they gathered quite a lot of information. So that included my passport, my husband's passport, marriage certificate, pay slips. They also then sent me a very lengthy questionnaire where I had to really detail my past history with the company, every role that I had, when I started, the salaries, and then in my existing role, very specific details about the duties that I had and the percentage of time I spent on each section, my direct reports, the org structure that I had, and they just simply said, give as much information. More information was better than less. It was quite in detail. As an example, they asked me what powers I had. So some of the phrasing that they used was quite funny, but what level of managerial powers I had, what discretion I could have over my employees, hiring, firing, budget responsibilities in my existing role. They then had another questionnaire where I had to fill in the exact or very similar questions, but for the new role, asking the exact same thing, and I had to supply an org chart for that as well. The questions are really trying to establish at what level you can make decisions at as a manager. Is it of an executive managerial position or a resource level? And it's simply so that they can qualify you for what they deem as an L1A manager. It took the lawyers about 4 weeks to get the finalised paperwork to me. Now, it would have been about 3 weeks had they have not messed up. There were a couple of errors along the way. So initially when they sent the paperwork to me, they had my salary wrong, and it was way off to the point where it wouldn't even make sense for that role. And as we know, it's one of the things that the case officer will look at when they're qualifying you for this visa. Therefore, we had to readjust the forms and paperwork, which took another week. And then on top of that, when they sent the new paperwork, somehow they'd mismatched the pages in the paperwork, and then they had to correct that again. We got there in the end. When the paperwork was finally on its way, the law firm messaged me to say that I could book my appointment. And this is the point where I would say this particular firm were not very helpful. I literally got an email with my case receipt number for my petition, and they simply said just book an appointment. Now, being somebody that's never been through this process before, I assumed that meant, okay, I just log on to the US Embassy website and book an appointment. And that was not the case at all. They gave no advice on what website to go to and what I had to do in order to book the appointment. So that weekend I spent Googling, researching how to book the appointment and what the process was. And I found the US London Embassy website that was really helpful in helping me work out what I needed to do. Now, when I found the US London Embassy website, it goes through all the various steps that you need to take in order to apply for your visa. Now, the first thing I encountered was immigrant versus non-immigrant visas. I assumed because I was going over to live in the US that it was an immigrant visa, but then I soon found out that actually an L1A, as it is a temporary work visa, it is not an immigrant visa, and actually it's under the category of non-immigrant visas. In addition, the other part that wasn't clear to me was what to do about my spouse's visa. So his L2 visa, I wasn't really clear on how I apply for that and book the appointment with him either. When I had got my bearings and worked out what visa and the process, I followed the government websites, and in there it had a section on how to apply with a link saying that this is step 1, go to this link, and we will hopefully put it somewhere up there, if not somewhere down there, to fill in first the DS-160 form. Now, I had to fill this in, and also my husband. And step 2 is to go to this link, which we'll hopefully put up there, if not down there again, to pay an MRV fee and to finally book the appointment. The DS-160 form took about an hour, I would say. To do that, you need your case receipt number that the attorneys should have provided you, and also a photo. And the photo needs to be a digital form, obviously, because it is online. They do provide you with an online tool to reformat it as well. If you don't have a photo, I do believe there is a way to proceed with the application and then you can provide a photo at the embassy, but I did have something, so it was fine. Once you have completed your DS-160 form, you will get a confirmation number and you will be requested to print out that page. That is the page that you need to take to your visa appointment. Now, a little tip for you. I filled in my DS-160 form on a Saturday morning and I had no issues going through the application process and completing it. My husband, on the other hand, started his in the afternoon and he had lots of issues with trying to complete his form. There were web app application errors coming up, and when I researched on the net, it seems that at the weekend this is a very common problem. I believe in the end he managed to finally get it completed on the Sunday evening, but my advice is avoid the weekends if you're doing the form. Once you've completed your DS-160 forms, you will now have your confirmation numbers. You then go to step 2, which is the other link, and on there you will create a profile. Now, you have to create a profile for everyone that is attending the appointment, so yourself, your spouse and any dependents, and apply the confirmation number of your DS-160 form to those profiles. You then have to pay, I think it was about $190 per person, and once you've paid that fee, you then have the option to book in for your appointment. And I think the nearest appointment was within 3 days, so not a long waiting time. Not then anyway. If you make a mistake on the DS-160 form, you can retrieve the application and correct the mistake as long as it's within 30 days. I wonder how I know this. When you correct the application, you will get a different confirmation number, and that needs to match your appointment that you've made at the embassy. Now, if you've already made an appointment on the old confirmation number, you simply need to go back in, cancel the existing appointment, go into your profile, change the confirmation number, and then rebook the appointment. It sounds quite cumbersome, but it's actually very easy. And I know, because I've done it. Now for the visa appointment itself. For the visa appointment, you will obviously need to bring your L1A petition pack. Now, the solicitors sent me 3 versions of this, and you can see how thick mine was. I will list below what my pack included down there. In addition to my pack, I also needed to bring the DS-160 form confirmation pages for myself and my husband, marriage certificates, passports. We also brought photos just in case. At the appointment itself, you cannot bring any large bags, backpacks, laptops. I brought a small backpack, which was perfectly fine. In addition, if you do bring a drink, it has to be in a sealed plastic bottle, no glass, and you can bring snacks along with you too. Our appointment was at 8:30 and we was told to arrive 30 minutes before. When we arrived at the embassy, we had to wait outside for a bit, so do be mindful of the weather on that day. And the initial queue, we had to check our passports and that we had the correct documentation. And then we went into another queue for security. For security, they also checked that your phone would turn on, they checked your bags. Yeah, I would say that was a pretty seamless process. When you actually enter the embassy, they then scan your DS-160 confirmation page and then you get a ticket number. And this is the number that you will use that takes you through the rest of the process. Tip for you, book the 8 a.m. appointment if possible. We booked the 8:30 one and we found that 8 a.m. people were turning up at the same time as us and going straight through. So definitely book the earliest appointment if you can. Once you have your ticket number, it is just a case of waiting for your number to come up on the screen and following instructions. Now, we found that the numbers of the tickets do not necessarily come up in order, and for us it certainly did not. We waited longer than others, and we found out that the reason was because there was only one case officer working that day for L1 visas. When our number finally came up, it had the window that we needed to go to. We then met this very friendly lady who went through all of our paperwork, checking that everything was there. She took some forms out of 2 of the packs. I was then made to pay, I think it was $500 fraud fee. Not entirely sure what that's for, but I had to pay that, go back to the lady, and then was told to go and sit back down whilst I wait for my interview. I think we waited between 30 minutes to 45 minutes to be called up for the interview. We went up to another window where there was the caseworker there. I would say I spent no more than 5 minutes maximum with him. He literally asked me 2 questions, and that was what was the title of my new job and how long had I been working for the company. It was really, really easy. Visa approved, and he simply explained that I would be contacted when my passport would be ready for collection. Pretty easy. The appointment process, I would say, took about 2 to 2.5 hours total. So please, if you go for the appointment, do allow time for it. I really hope that was helpful. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please comment below.